Welcome to Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and review show. This time we get behind the wheel of the all-new Kia Niro. There's an electric one on the way, but what's it like as a hybrid? Cadillac's new Escalade-V squares up against the Mercedes G-Class, and we take a look at Bentley's new Flying Spur S. Plus the new Honda Civic and the return of the Hummer. That's all coming up, but first, the news. The famous luxury car brand Aston Martin has announced plans for a huge new investment plan as it looks to lower its debts. The £653 million plan includes £78 million from the Saudi Public Investment Fund in exchange for a 16.7% shareholding. The fund is already a shareholder in both McLaren and American EV startup Lucid. More than half of the total investment is to come from the fund. Mercedes and an investment group headed by Aston Martin Executive Chair Lawrence Stroll, with the remainder coming from a public share issue. Aston Martin has also revealed that it turned down an offer from Chinese carmaker Geely, stating the deal would have been heavily dilutive for existing shareholders.
Kia Niro has long been one of our favourite crossovers. With ICE, hybrid and EV options, it has long offered something for everyone at an exceptionally good price point. It's been around for a while though, so now there's a new one. And first things first, it looks great. It's fair to say that Kia is on a bit of a roll recently when it comes to exterior styling, and the new Niro is another great example. From any angle, it looks fresh and interesting. We're particularly fond of the front end that looks like a stormtrooper's helmet. On the flanks there's a rear quarter panel that can be spec'd in a contrasting colour, while at the back some boomerang tail lights mark it apart from just about anything else in its class. The interior is similarly stylish with an eye-catching two-spoke steering wheel and a big pair of bright screens. Entry-level cars get a smaller infotainment screen but benefit from wireless smartphone connectivity. A digital panel beneath the central air vents controls the climate control, which looks great but can be a little fiddly while on the move. An electric version is on the way, but for now there's a pair of hybrid options, one series hybrid called the HEV and a plug-in called the PHEV. Both use a 1.6-litre petrol motor, with the HEV producing a combined 139 brake horsepower and the PHEV making 180. We'll start with the regular hybrid, which sets off quietly in electric mode before the engine kicks in seamlessly. Performance isn't exactly rapid. 0 to 62 takes a steady 10.8 seconds, but it's quick enough compared with its rivals. There are two driving modes, Eco and Sport, with the latter sharpening up throttle response and making the gearbox a bit too eager to shift down, causing a loud and unrefined groan from the engine. Eco mode suits the car much better, allowing you to make the most of the hybrid system to see some impressive MPG figures. Behind the steering wheel you find a pair of paddles, but rather than operate the gearbox, they increase or decrease your regenerative braking, allowing you to approach junctions often without the brake pedal. And while the Niro is far from a sports car, the steering is direct, making the car feel smaller than it actually is. Ride quality is very good, soaking up the worst of Britain's potholed B roads with ease, even with the bigger 18-inch alloys. It's brilliantly refined too, with minimal wind and tyre noise inside the cabin.
The PHEV model is just as refined, especially in electric-only mode. It gets an extra 40 horsepower, which you can really feel after stepping out of the regular hybrid. It reaches 62 miles per hour from a standstill a second quicker, with extra torque offering up some decent shove out of the corners. This time the paddles can operate the gears, but only in sport mode. In PHEV guise, this setting is much more refined, making better use of the electric motor. Having control of the gears means you don't get any surprising downshifts too. It's no hot hatch, but with predictable handling and decent power, you can have fun. The PHEV's 11.1 kilowatt-hour battery provides up to 40 miles of electric range, great for zero-emission commuting and school runs. As we've said before, plug-in hybrids offer a great halfway house between internal combustion and electric cars. We expect this one to sell well, although it isn't without its rivals. Another plug-in to consider is this, the Mini Countryman. It gets a bit more power than the Kia despite its smaller 1.5-litre 3-pot. It's quicker too, but its much smaller EV range will put a lot of buyers off. And while its retro styling will be hugely appealing to some, it doesn't exactly break the mould like the ultra-modern Niro.
Like other recent models from Kia, the Sorento and Sportage, the new Niro stands out in a class of copycat crossovers. Prices for the HEV start at under £28,000, rising to £33,500 for the plug-in. There's an EV on the way too, with a 285-mile range, but our money would go with a plug-in.
The latest Cadillac Escalade is a truly enormous car. In fact, it's even bigger than the old one, thanks to some extra length in the wheelbase. See this cruising slowly through town and it's immediately recognisable. The German manufacturers may be pioneering huge grills at the moment, but the Escalade takes it to a whole new level. It gets all the signature Cadillac design elements, just scaled up with long narrow headlights and a badge the size of a child's face. Naturally, for a car of this bulk, it gets a suitably massive engine. A 6.2-litre V8 with 420 horsepower to be precise. But interestingly, this isn't the only option. For the first time in the Escalade's history, it's available with a diesel motor. While this news is unlikely to strike much good cheer among environmentalists, it is at least a bit greener than the petrol-powered alternative, offering greater fuel economy and just as much torque. However, for 2023 there is a third option. This is the new Cadillac Escalade-V, the fastest and most powerful Escalade ever. To some, the Escalade is a long overdue addition to Cadillac's V range. Unlike the smaller performance saloon cars though, the Escalade gets no supercar baiting Blackwing version. Instead, the regular V is the top of the Escalade pile. Under the bonnet sits a hand-built supercharged version of the 6.2-litre V8, pumping out 682 all-American horsepower. With its launch control system and 10-speed auto box, it will do 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. Not bad for a car the size of Wales. 80% of its 653 pounds-feet of torque is available from 2000 RPM, meaning it will provide the sort of shove usually reserved for EVs. The rumbling V8, whining supercharger and Barker quad exhaust though are some not so subtle reminders that this is certainly no electric car. Where the standard Escalade is quiet and refined, the V is raucous and visceral. But while the sounds may be loud, the styling isn't. There are some subtle tweaks to mark it out from a regular car, but they don't go much beyond red brake calipers and big wheels.
If you're in the market though for a big V8 luxury SUV, are you better off looking to Germany? This is the Mercedes AMG G-Class, the love child of a military Jeep and a limousine. And this one in particular is the AMG-tuned G63, one of the silliest and most enjoyable SUVs money can buy. Unlike old AMG G-Wagons, this new one doesn't get a detuned engine from an E63. Nowadays, the chassis can actually handle the power. It does get the monstrous 4-litre bi-turbo V8 from a GTR, producing 577 brake horsepower. Now that's not as much as you would get in the Caddy, but it will match its acceleration to 60, despite its brick-like aerodynamics. Inside, it's every bit as luxurious as any of Merc's other high-end cars, and a true rival to the beautifully trimmed Escalade.
Electric cars then may be beginning to take over, but these cars are proof that petrol is going out with a bang.
After the break, Hummer's back with a new EV.
Coming up, the all-new Honda Civic. But first,
the Bentley Flying Spur is 2 cars in one. On the one hand, it's a stately limousine with acres of space and the finest materials one could hope to find in a motorcar. On the other hand, it's a fast, powerful Grand Tourer capable of supercar speeds. We featured the V6 hybrid model earlier this year and were familiar with the V8 and W12 models, but now there's another version. It's called the Flying Spur S, and it's a limo designed for those who like to drive themselves rather than sit in the back. It's available with either the 2.9 V6 hybrid setup or the 4-litre V8. Despite its much greater capacity, the V8 isn't a great deal more powerful than the hybrid at 542 brake horsepower versus 536. At this end of the market, we'd spend the extra cash and go for the V8 though. It makes a great noise and is more in keeping with the rest of the car and the brand as a whole. 0 to 62 takes 4 seconds, while top speed is a whopping 198 miles per hour. The powertrain is unchanged from the standard V8, with the changes largely limited to aesthetics. Almost all of the chrome trim has been ditched in favour of some black trim. The lights have been tinted, while the exhausts get a darker hue to add the blacked out look. Only the Bentley badges remain in chrome. S models get some bespoke 22-inch alloys with bright red brake calipers hiding behind them. The interior changes are similarly subtle, with some badges and special leather marking it apart from standard cars. Overall then, the S model is just a regular car that's been de-chromed. But if that's what you're into, here it is.
it isn't every day that we get the chance to report on an all-new Honda Civic. One of the world's most popular cars. When a new one's released, it's a big deal. And here it is, the 11th generation 2022 Honda Civic. And straight away, it's aesthetically much more complete and grown up than the last one. To put it kindly, the old car's styling had a lot going on, but this new car is altogether more fluid and cohesive. It retains the saloon-like styling, and this time it's slightly longer, giving it more room inside than rivals like the Ford Focus and Volkswagen Golf. It has a lower roofline too, distinguishing it further from its family hatch competitors. It's on the inside though where it's really improved. The old car's cabin left a lot to be desired, with dated infotainment and cheap-feeling switches. This new car, though, looks altogether more desirable, with fancy new honeycomb air vents and a fresh pair of screens bringing it right up to date. The buttons are all where you'd expect them to be, and the infotainment comes complete with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. From a driver's perspective, visibility is improved thanks to the lack of rear wing across the back window. Best of all, though, it's immensely spacious, with plenty of room on board for 4 tall adults and their luggage. Powering the Civic is a new hybrid setup. It's called eHEV, and it's a little different to most hybrids you may be familiar with. Instead of driving the wheels, the 2-litre petrol motor mostly drives a generator, which charges a small battery. This in turn powers an electric motor on the front axle, meaning the new Civic effectively drives like an EV. It makes 181 bhp and a shed load of torque, giving you proper EV performance. The petrol engine can send power directly to the wheels if it needs to, particularly in sport mode, where it can provide an extra kick and simulate gear changes. 0 to 62 takes 7.8 seconds, and it has an official MPG figure of 56.4.
Ever since the 1970s, though, the Honda Civic has had a consistent rival, the Volkswagen Golf. And while there are plenty of petrol and diesel options available, there are also 2 electrified models, the e-hybrid and the GTE. These more conventional PHEVs allow you to plug them into charge rather than relying on a generator, something which Honda says many owners won't bother doing. Still, the latest Golf is an impressive car, as long as you can put up with the clumsy infotainment system. The GTE is marketed as a hybrid hot hatch, and with more than 240 horsepower, it will hit 62 from rest in 6.7 seconds. And with even more powertrain options, there's this, the Hyundai Ioniq. Available as either a full EV, series hybrid or plug-in hybrid, the Ioniq gives you plenty of choice. It perhaps isn't quite as handsome as the Honda or the VW, but it's loaded with tech. It's incredibly efficient too, regardless of which version you go for. However, order books are now closing, so you may need to buy from dealer stock.
So, with the market now packed full of hybridized hatchbacks, will Honda's EV-like performance and economy win over buyers? Well, we think so. It's an interesting take and eliminates the need to find and use unreliable charging points. And the best is yet to come, as there is a sporty Type R on the way, and we cannot wait to see that.
Hummer is back. Yep, you heard that right. GMC has relaunched Hummer with its wildest truck yet. A far cry from the old Humvee military vehicles, this new electric off-roader is the fastest, most powerful and greenest Hummer yet. Gone are the old asthmatic gas-guzzling engines, replaced instead by 3 electric motors, 1 at the front and 2 driving the rear wheels. The result, as estimated by the manufacturer GMC, is 1,000 brake horsepower for the pickup version and a frankly hilarious 11,500 pounds-feet of torque, enough to tow a small continent and hit 60 miles per hour from rest in 3.5 seconds. This SUV version, though, will have to make do with a measly 830 horsepower, but these figures are just estimates for now. It may not have the traditional round headlights and angular bodywork of its forebears, but it retains the classic Hummer lettering at the front and looks just as tough as ever. It also gets some boxy wheel arches and massive 35-inch tyres for extra off-road credibility. The cabin is thoroughly modern, with a nod to the old H1 with a huge centre console between the front seats. There's plenty of tech on board, including the interestingly named Watts to Freedom mode that unleashes the truck's maximum performance. But perhaps the coolest bit of sci-fi technology is the so-called crab walk function, which effectively allows the Hummer EV to drive sideways for maximum manoeuvrability. It also gets some adaptive air suspension that can raise or lower the car to help you get over whatever obstacle might be in front of you. GMC says that prices will start somewhere in the region of $85,000 for the entry-level EV2. This gets just 2 motors rather than 3 and will be capable of 250 miles on a single charge. The bigger 3-motor cars will start at around $105,000 with a 300-plus mile range. Order books are opening next spring, and we can almost guarantee it won't be coming to the UK.
Join us again next week on Auto Mundial as we take a look at the new Mercedes GLC.